freedom of sexuality, coming out, being visible, was seen as crucial. The personal is political. So we chanted out of the closets and into the streets, and did. And we were quite dismissive of our camp brothers and sisters who wanted to blend in, not rock the boat, be really respectable, pass as straight if they could. And there was a little manifesto that really caught my imagination and sort of became my guiding principle that I kept throughout life. And it's fabulously 70s, and it's called Blatant Is Beautiful.
Will's mantra from his gay liberation days is be yourself, be proud of who you are, and come out. Coming out was the most important thing because it was coming out to yourself, it was coming out to your family, it was coming out to your friends, it was coming out to society. That it was a very healthy thing to do rather than hide behind closed doors.
I was there to support my brother and his gay friends, and many of whom were friends of mine. And their point really was very much about being gay and proud of it. And that being out was a really important thing.
My coming out, my involvement with Adelaide gay community is perhaps not typical. I was 21, which was probably a little bit late, so it was the beginning of 1971. And curiously, I'd been studying accountancy, and I actually took a year off in 1972 because I thought, I'll earn some money and I'll actually have treatment to stop being gay. Isn't that amazing? And almost making that decision, I suddenly thought, that's silly. Why do that? If you're gay, be gay. But I had absolutely no idea. As I say, I was an effeminate man and people probably thought I was gay, but no one ever said that to me, and camp was the word we used then. So I thought, gosh, I don't know what to do.
I was at uni, at Adelaide Uni. It was a time of great ferment. The Bar Smith lawns would always be speakers, Lynn Arnold, etc. And lots of pamphlets. And I think I just saw a pamphlet and got it for Will and gave it to Will. And then he went to one of the first meetings.
My sister found a pamphlet about gay liberation. They were having a meeting. I think this was about mid-1972. So I thought, something is happening. Now, one gay liberator of that time, a very good friend of mine actually, Will Surgeon, recalls how in 1972 he was working at a firm of chartered accountants around in Lee Street. On Friday night, after finishing work, he went drinking with his accounting colleagues at the Duke of York, as they did every Friday. On this particular night, he slipped away across the road to Bloor Court and attended his first gay liberation meeting. And as I say, that night changed my life. My life was different after that. And I sort of threw myself into gay liberation with a vengeance.
So the aim of the gay liberationists wasn't to work with the government or to work behind the scenes. It was actually to be blatant, as Will would say, and open about their sexuality, to actually offend, if you like, sensibilities and make demands that in some way or other would convince society that patriarchy was wrong and it needed to be overthrown. And similarly, a heterosexist society needed to be overthrown and something more tolerant and accepting put in its place. How they were going to do it, I don't know, but they had a lot of fun trying.
What created Gay Liberation Front was Gay Activist Alliance, which instead of sitting around and raising our consciousness and talking about changing the world, it was getting out and doing it, confronting society. So it was a very activist approach, and a cell, a commune was established, and there were a number of them, but one was at 88 Hill Street. And that was really the epicentre of Gay Activist Alliance and activist activity. In fact, I lived there for a year or so in 1973, 74, the time of the Gay Pride Week, which happened at least in Sydney, Melbourne and Adelaide on the first Gay Pride March here in Adelaide in 1973.
There was an edge to that march, I think. I think people were a bit apprehensive, but not scared. I mean, because you didn't know how it would be received. I know a friend of mine, mother, had said to me, "But people will think you're gay, Susie." And I remember thinking, "Oh, that's not the point."
And the other thing we did, and linked in with Gay Pride, was zaps.
Does everyone know what a zap is? No. You're like a zap of lightning, a quick political happening to confront and upset.
So whenever somebody like a television star or a doctor or somebody else in a public position made an anti-gay comment, then this group, the Gay Activists Alliance, of which Will was a member, would descend upon the studio or the doctor's waiting rooms, and they would sit in and sing songs that they'd made up about being out and proud homosexuals.
One of them was, for example, was in a gynaecologist's rooms in Ward Street, North Adelaide. We were absolutely appalled that one of our members had been forced to go and see her mother's gynaecologist because she told her mother she was a lesbian.
And her mother was very concerned and decided she'd better go along, send her daughter along to her gynaecologist for some sexual counselling. Of course, gynecologists are very skilled sexual counsellors, we all know, especially male gynecologists. So anyway, he counselled the lesbian GAA member, and he said because she was a lesbian, she was probably more dominant and more like a man, and therefore if she was having trouble having sexual congress with a man and not enjoying it, probably what she needed to do was take the active role and get on top and mount the man. And that would solve all her problems. It's really as simple as that, you see.
So we decided he had to be zapped. So we stormed into his offices, chanting and carrying placards, you know, about gay rights and 2468 gay is just as good and straight and those sorts of things to embarrass him and to make a political point. Of course, his waiting room was full of Adelaide matrons waiting to have a gynecological consult. And they thought, what on earth is going on here?
Well, of course, these days they'd think it was a terrorist attack, wouldn't they? It looked a bit like it. They'd be in Baxter by now. That group, I'll wager.
Some other activity that we did in those days, of course, was spray painting, which again is quite subversive, but we wanted to get that message out, as I say, confront society, and we saw the church as one of the repressive institutions which were very anti-gay. So they needed to be hit and get the message. So we'd spray paint church walls with things like gays fuck for fun, and of course we'd have to do it in the dead of night, darkness. We'd have to have a few people on the lookout so that we didn't get caught. Again, we thought it was important. It was perhaps mischievous, and perhaps, I'm sure some people would see it as vandalism, but we thought such was the importance of our message that those tactics were justified.
The early 1970s gay activism movement, I think, was critical. You know, somebody had to start the ball rolling. If it wasn't for people like Will picking up the movement, going out there, even when it was illegal, putting themselves at much greater risk than most of us are these days, we would be far worse off for it.
I know, for instance, that like when Will comes into class, people will come up and say to me, well, this is really important to me personally, and how much they admire someone who can come and speak and be those kinds of things. And in terms of younger people, it's confidence that you've got a long future ahead that is not, you know, all about the angst and all of the terrible things that people say it is and can be, and you'll be lonely and those kinds of stereotypes. But much more the kind of, I'm concerned about, he doesn't present a wounded identity.
I know that some people didn't enjoy their teenage years and their 20s perhaps, whereas I think we had a lot of fun. It was fun, you know, and we still have fun.
I like to think that I'm some sort of role model. You know, physically I like to stay really fit and keep my body trim and be a good example of aging well. So I see that as really important. And to my great surprise, I went to the International Gay Games in Amsterdam in 1998, and I actually won a bronze medal for the sprint triathlon. I really trained quite hard, and I'm a rotten swimmer, but I'm quite a good cyclist and runner.
And he likes to say, I'm a sissy, but I also play sport. So, in that way, he's being a gay activist. He's saying sissies can also be sportsmen.
There's a whole range of things that I like to have him there for. His physicality, whether he comes as himself or as kind of the gay athlete, because at different times it's been different emphases, or as Dr. Gertrude Glossip. All of those are fantastic for my students.
Will is primarily a gay activist, and I think primarily Gertrude is queer. I mean, she celebrates gender and sexual diversity.
She's been so good for the community, the way that she's been able to take her message through Feast and the gay history walks.
And the aim of history walks is to educate people, both from our own gay and lesbian community and the general public, about the gay history of Adelaide, which has never been written, and mainstream history books don't have very much at all about the homosexual history. So the history walks are really important for that reason.
She's brought, I suppose, a mixture of an almost academic interest in our history, in our gay heritage, and dressed it up in that stereotype that we can, that sort of draggy sort of thing that's part of gay history and heritage as well.
I've heard people say, well, really, Gertrude is just Will in a frock. I like to think she's a bit more of a particular character than I am.
Oh dear, how's that for volume? You can hear all right? Yes. Look, I was just given this gay relic on the way over here. We just found it by the cargo club, and we can't date it yet. It could be 40s, 50s or 60s. It's a lovely empty bottle of Rush. Isn't that gorgeous? Yes, I'll just pop that down there. We must look after our relics.
And then Margie Fisher and others were setting up the first Feast Festival, and Margie remembered that John Lee, a friend of Will and mine, who had subsequently died, but he took people on a history walk in 1990. A gay history walk through Adelaide. And Margie remembered that and asked if Will and I would like to recreate it for the first Feast Festival in 97. And we said we would, but then we had the idea of asking Gertrude to be the tour guide.
And my life's never been the same. And now you could really say I'm really a boutique celebrity, I think you could say, wouldn't you?
And of course, a celebrity is famous for being famous. So I mean, that's what Gertrude is, and you're right, she makes use of that to put a message out there about sexual diversity and gender diversity, and being positive about who you are as an individual.
Will and Gertrude have really lived their life, and I think that's a wonderful thing to have done by your late 50s. And Will is remarkable in continuing to do that. So he doesn't buy the money, power and status society. If I want anything for Will, I would want him really to continue living as he has since the 70s and to never stop.
I think Will continue in some way, even if Gertrude retires, to be a gay activist. I think that's central to Will's being.
He presents, something that is continually and has not stopped growing and being and becoming all that we can be. And so I think living that, and that's what he means by being, blatant is beautiful and, incredibly, incredibly important.
As I say, this year Gertrude's doing her 13th history walk. Who knows if she'll be doing it in 10 years' time, but still appearing and performing and contributing in some way to that broader community. I certainly hope I'm doing that. I'd like to think perhaps I'm asked to talk to people about the past, the present, and the future as someone that's survived and lived through quite a lot and quite a lot of changes.